The garage fell silent the moment the boy touched the car. Not gradually, not the way silence usually settles into a room. All at once, like a held breath. 14 men, some of the most decorated automotive engineers and restoration specialists in the country, stood in a semicircle around a 1962 Aston Martin DB4 that had defeated every single one of them. Combined, those 14 men had over 200 years of experience. Between them, they held certifications from institutions in 7 countries. 3 of them had restored cars for European royalty. None of them had been able to find the fault. The boy had been in the garage for 11 minutes. He was 12 years old. Small for his age, his name was Marcus. He was wearing a gray orphanage sweatshirt 2 sizes too big and a pair of sneakers held together at the left toe with electrical tape. He had arrived with nothing, no tools, no credentials, no introduction beyond the single sentence the orphanage director had said to the billionaire on the phone 3 days earlier. "I don't know how to explain it. You just need to see him with an engine." Marcus crouched beside the Aston Martin's front left wheel well. He had not asked permission. He had not introduced himself to anyone in the room. He had simply walked in, looked at the car for 90 seconds with the focused stillness of someone listening to something no one else could hear, and then picked up a wrench from the nearest workbench and crouched down. The billionaire, Edward Ashworth, 64 years old, owner of Ashworth Global, a man whose collection of rare automobiles was valued at $60 million, stood at the back of the garage and watched. He had spent $430,000 trying to fix this car. He was watching a 12-year-old in taped sneakers. Marcus looked up from the wheel well. "Your harmonic balancer is cracked," he said. "But that's not the real problem. The real problem is what caused it. Your previous mechanic replaced the crankshaft pulley without checking the main bearing clearances. The tolerances are off by 0.004 of an inch. The whole bottom end has been running wrong for probably 2 years." Nobody moved. Marcus looked at Edward Ashworth directly. "I can fix it," he said, "but I'll need 3 days, and I'll need to be left alone." Marcus had grown up with engines the way other children grow up with language. His father, a man named Joseph, who had worked as a mechanic in Port-au-Prince before immigrating, had brought Marcus into his small repair shop before the boy could walk properly, had sat him on a workbench surrounded by carburetors and timing belts, and talked to him about engines the way some fathers talk to their children about the world, with the reverence of someone sharing something sacred. Joseph had died when Marcus was 8, a Tuesday, a rainy one, a car that came through a red light. Marcus had gone to the orphanage on a Wednesday. He had brought nothing with him except a small photograph of his father standing beside a repaired 1978 Peugeot 504, grinning like he had just solved the most satisfying puzzle in the world. That photograph lived inside the cover of a notebook Marcus carried everywhere. A notebook filled with engine diagrams he had drawn from memory, annotated in a cramped, precise handwriting that his teachers found difficult to reconcile with his performance in every other subject. Marcus was not a strong student in the conventional sense. He was not interested in the conventional sense. He was interested in engines. In the specific physical, logical language of mechanical systems, the way everything connected to everything else, the way a problem in one place always originated somewhere else, the way a car told you what was wrong if you were quiet enough to listen. The orphanage director, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had been running St. Augustine's home for 11 years and had developed an accurate instinct for what each child in her care needed, had recognized Marcus's gift within his first month. She had found him in the maintenance room at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, having completely disassembled and correctly reassembled the building's aging boiler system. The boiler had not worked properly in 3 years. It worked perfectly after that Saturday. Mrs. Patterson had started making phone calls. Edward Ashworth had not started wealthy. That was the part of his biography he still kept closest. The part that his board members and his magazine profiles and his Forbes listing had gradually buried under the accumulation of what he had become. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Birmingham. His father had been a factory worker. His mother had cleaned offices. He had gotten his first job at 14 in a local garage, sweeping floors, handing tools, watching everything with the same focused attention that he would later apply to identifying undervalued companies before anyone else saw their potential. The 1962 Aston Martin DB4 had belonged to his father. Not originally. His father had never owned anything like it. But Edward had bought it 15 years ago at an estate auction, had recognized it somehow as the exact car his father had pointed out on a rainy street in Birmingham when Edward was 9 years old. His father had stopped walking, had stood in the rain looking at this car with an expression Edward had never seen on him before or since. Some things, his father had said, are made so well that they deserve to last forever. His father had died the following year. Edward had spent 15 years and $430,000 trying to make the car run. Nobody had been able to do it. He had worked through the finest restoration specialists in Britain, then Europe, then America. 50 mechanics in total, each one supremely qualified, each one defeated by the same intermittent fault that no diagnostic equipment could isolate and no expertise could resolve. When Mrs. Patterson had called, referred by a city councilman who had heard about a 12-year-old who fixed things, Edward had said no 3 times before he said yes. He had said yes because he had run out of other options, and because something in Mrs. Patterson's voice when she said, "You just need to see him with an engine," reminded him in a way he could not explain of his father standing in the rain. Marcus worked alone. That had been his condition, and Edward had honored it, mostly. He watched from the garage doorway sometimes, far enough back that he hoped he wasn't intruding. Marcus never acknowledged him, which Edward took as tolerance. On the first day, Marcus did nothing but listen. He ran the engine in short intervals, stopped it, ran it again, crouched in different positions around the car with an expression of absolute concentration that Edward recognized, with a jolt that surprised him, as the same expression he wore in his own best moments. The expression of someone for whom the problem in front of them is the only thing that exists. On the second day Marcus worked. He worked with a precision that silenced the 2 engineers Edward had positioned nearby just in case. They had been prepared to help. They stood instead and watched a 12-year-old in a too big sweatshirt perform a bottom-end inspection on a 60-year-old engine with the methodical confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. He had not done it 1,000 times. He had done it in his mind, from his father's descriptions and his own notebooks, more times than he could count. On the evening of the second day, Edward brought food to the garage. Marcus ate without stopping work, one hand holding a sandwich, the other torquing a bolt with the kind of feel that cannot be taught, only developed over years. Edward sat on a stool near the door. "Your father teach you?" he said. Marcus didn't look up. "Everything," he said. Edward was quiet for a moment. "Mine too," he said. "Different thing. Same idea." Marcus looked up then, just briefly, then back to the engine. But something in the garage had shifted slightly, the way air shifts before weather changes. On the third day Marcus finished. He closed the hood at 4:17 p.m. He picked up a rag and wiped his hands with the deliberate thoroughness of someone who had learned that the end of the work deserved the same attention as the beginning. Then he looked at Edward. "Try it," he said. Edward Ashworth sat in the driver's seat of a 1962 Aston Martin DB4 for the first time in 15 years. He turned the key. The engine started, not with a cough or a struggle or any of the false starts that had preceded every previous attempt. It started cleanly, settled into an idle that was, there was no other word for it, correct. The particular note of an inline-6 engine running exactly as it was designed to run 62 years ago. Edward sat very still, his hands on the steering wheel, the engine running. Outside the garage, Marcus was sitting on the ground with his back against the wall, knees up, eating an apple with the total unconcern of someone who had never doubted the outcome. Edward got out of the car. He stood in the garage doorway, looking at this boy. "What do you want?" he said. "Name it." Marcus looked up. "To go to engineering school," he said, without hesitation, without performance. Just the straightforward articulation of the thing he had always wanted and never had a path to. "A real one, where they teach you properly." Edward looked at him for a long moment. "Done?" he said. Marcus nodded, took another bite of the apple. "And Marcus," Edward said. "Yeah. Your father, what was his name?" Marcus looked at him. "Joseph," he said. Edward nodded. He went back into the garage. He sat in the car for a while longer with the engine running, not driving anywhere, just listening to it. Outside, Marcus finished his apple. He opened his notebook to a new page, and he started drawing. The engineering scholarship was established within 30 days, not just for Marcus. Edward funded it broadly. A full residential program at a technical institute, open to children from care homes across the state, with a specific focus on mechanical and automotive engineering. It was named quietly and without announcement the Joseph Marcus Foundation. Marcus was its first student. He graduated at the top of his class 4 years later. He went on to study mechanical engineering at university. He still carries the notebook. The photograph of his father is still inside the cover. And somewhere in a garage that now gets used, that gets driven carefully on Sunday mornings through the city, a 1962 Aston Martin DB4 runs exactly as it was designed to run. Because a 12-year-old boy was quiet enough to listen to what it was trying to say. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?